first of all, you got to at least give me kudos for, if nothing else, the fact that now says 2 Samuel instead of 1 Samuel. I did one thing right today. We've moved into 2 Samuel chapter 2, where we're seeing David begin to take the throne of Israel from his deceased father-in-law, the first king of Israel, King Saul. King Saul is dead. David is taking over the rulership of Israel. As we've seen, he's met with opposition. You've got two houses that want to control authority in Israel. They want to have the power. You've got the house of Saul. Even though Saul is dead, I will continue this morning speaking in terms of the house of Saul. And what I mean is that by that is the sons of Saul, the commanders of Saul's army, everybody that wants the Saul family dynasty to continue. You have the house of Saul vying for power, and you have the house of David vying for power. There's problem, there's opposition, and what we're going to see is tribal warfare. Tribal warfare. Who are the players here as we go back into the story? I don't know why I taught last week, but I feel like I haven't been here in a month. So just to get it on paper, who the players are. These are odd names. It would be easier if it was Jerry and Steve and Bill and Tom. We could follow those names. When you have names like Ishbosheth, it becomes a little harder for our brain to keep up with, okay, now who's that guy again? Just so you know, as we go through this, Ishbosheth is one of the major players in this chapter. He's Saul's son. Saul was killed with 3 of his sons on Mount Gilboa. He has a number of sons who are still alive, and Ishbosheth is one of them. So he is the king of the 11 tribes of Israel for 2 years. I say it's the last 2 years that he's the king, that it probably took Yoav, not Yoav, it's Avned, we'll see him in a second. It probably took the Israeli army commander several years to get the house of Saul to decide on one king. And he probably reigns in the last of the 7.5 years of David here. That will make more sense in just a minute. But Ishbosheth, he is what's the word? Not a parrot, but like a mannequin god. King. He's been propped up. He's an illegitimate king who's been propped up by a stronger man than him, and that man is Avned. He's the commander of Ishbosheth's army. If you want to know where the real power is in the 11 tribes, it's this man. It's Avned. It's the army commander, the general or commander of the Israeli army. He's the one calling the shots. Ishbosheth has been propped up. He's an illegitimate king. He wasn't called to be king by Yahweh. He's an illegitimate king in every sense of the term, being propped up by the military that supports him. The other player on the other side, this is the house of Saul, Ishbosheth, and Avned. And on the other side, you have the house of David. You have David himself, Yahweh's chosen anointed king of all Israel, but right now, he only has control over one tribe, Judah, his own tribe. And you have his commander of the army. Yoav is his name. Remember the J. The Hebrew language has no sound for J. J's are always translated as wise, pronounced as wise, like the name Jesus. A proper Jew would never say Jesus. His name is Yeshua. This man, Joab's name is Yoav. Yoav, and he is David's nephew. He's David's sister's son, and he's also the commander of David's army. So these are the players. For 7.5 years, David will only be the king of one tribe of Israel, Judah. For 7.5 years, David will only be the king of one tribe in Israel. That's his own tribe, the tribe of Judah. What I said about Ishbosheth reigning for 2 years, we don't know whether it's the first 2 years of David's 7.5 years, somewhere in the middle of David's 7.5 years, or at the end of David's 7.5 years, that this Ishbosheth reigns for 2 years. I believe it's at the end. I think it probably took Avned quite some time to get the 11 tribes to agree, okay, we'll make that son the king. Because as these wars take place, as the fighting begins, between David's house and Ishbosheth's house. They are both reigning kings. So, just an aside, the question that's being asked here, the problem in 2 Samuel chapter 7 is who's going to be the next king of Israel? Our king is dead. Who are we going to raise up in the great King Saul's place? Someone from his family or someone from David's family? And that's the fight. That's the fight. The house of Saul versus the house of David. Who will be king in Israel now that Saul is dead? Just to see the players, in 2 Samuel chapter 2 verse 10, Ishbosheth, it introduces and tells us about this man Ishbosheth. It says Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he was king for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. As I said before, this Ishbosheth was an illegitimate, propped up figurehead of a king. He was propped up by the power of Avner and the Jewish army that backed him. It happens in a lot of kingdoms. Whoever is in control of the army, whoever has the power of the sword, has the authority and the power in the nation over the citizenry. That's what we've got going on here. This in every way is a military coup. Avner has raised up, having the military behind him, and decided, you know what? He's going to be king. This is happening in the mind of Avner. He's the one who chose Ishbosheth to be king. He did not seek God's approval. He did not seek God's direction. He is a powerful man, the commander of the army, who selected Ishbosheth to be the king of Israel over the 11 tribes. Make no mistake, Ishbosheth is a figurehead only, a weak man, a weak king, illegitimate in every sense of the term. The guy running the show is Avner, the commander of the army. We'll see that more and more as the chapter unfolds. The next verse says, the time that David was king in Hebron. Hebron is where David has his headquarters. It says the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So Ishbosheth, a 2-year reign. David will have a 40-year reign, but it will begin with 7.5 years in Hebron over one house, one tribe, the tribe of Judah only. A lot to keep track of. Remember, in the next verse, something unusual happens. The house of Saul, represented by his commander Avner, meets with the house of David. Let's put this thing to rest. Who's going to be king? And it's Avner from the house of Saul who decided, we'll fight for it. Instead of turning to the Lord God, instead of turning to Yahweh, instead of asking God, God, who have you anointed to be king? Who do you want to be king? Avner shows up and says, we'll fight for it, and the stronger army will determine who will be king. That's not the way God does things. He had already, some 18 years ago, anointed David as the king. God isn't surprised by this, but He allows it. Now, this is an interesting question as you look through these things. Why would God allow a 7.5-year transfer of power? Why didn't God make David the king over all 12 tribes of Israel the day Saul died? Could He have done it? Yes or no? Well, of course He could have. But why did He allow 7.5 years? It's an interesting question, one that only God can answer one day if you remember to ask Him when you get there. We just don't have that answer in the book. Why, Lord, 7.5 years, other than the fact that Israel spiritually is a horrible idolatrous people during this time? Remember again, I'll remind you one more time, the only reason Israel had King Saul in the first place is because Israel rejected Yahweh as being their king. They didn't want to be different from the other nations. They didn't want to have judges on earth, only judges, not kings, while they worshiped Yahweh as their king. They wanted to scrap all that. They wanted a human king. They demanded of Yahweh that they have a human king. And who did God give them? Saul. That's the heart of these people. And as the heart starts to come around to David, this hard-hearted people, it took years for God to soften them enough to come to the feet of David and say, we will follow you as king. It's an obstinate, stiff-necked people. They always have been. The Scripture tells us the story over many, many books that this is the heart of Israel. Why did it take 7.5 years? Maybe because Israel was just that obstinate. So, Avner, this event, Avner the son of Ner went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. So they meet at Gibeon. He comes with the servants Ishbosheth, the son of Saul. So Avner, the commander of the northern army, comes with some servants. In the next verse, it says Joab, David's army, meets him there. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. They sat down, one on one side of the pool, the other on the other side of the pool. So here you have the military giants of the day. You have Saul's man Avner, David's man Joab. They have come to talk. Who's going to be the king? Who has rightful heirship to the throne of Israel? Who would Yahweh want to put on the throne? And Avner says, we'll fight for it. Let's do this. I'll present 12 of my mightiest men. You present 12 of your mightiest men. Let them go into hand-to-hand combat. And whoever wins, that's who will be the next king. Either the house of Saul or the house of David. Listen, buddy, winner take all right now. He wanted to fight. It's interesting that he didn't say, let's call on the high priest of Israel. Let's go before the Urim and Thummim. Let's ask the living God, our Creator, the one who brought us out by 10 plagues through the Red Sea and all the rest. Let's ask God who will lead His people. Avner says, let's go to war. We'll decide it. It's not the way God does things. Avner, I'm painting him as a bad guy. Don't miss this. I'm painting him as a bad guy. But he's the bad guy that's about to put David in power in Israel. Strange. Only in Israel can these things occur. But he's the guy that for all the marbles, wanting the house of Saul to continue in power, says, I will put forth my 12 mightiest men, and you put forth your 12 mightiest men, and we'll fight it out. And what do we see during the fight? All 24 men kill each other. They each grab each other's hair. They each thrust each other through with a sword. They all, 24 of them, fall dead. It's an inconclusive event. And so now that it's inconclusive, what do we have to do but go on and further fight? Avner has decided we will fight to determine who will be king. It's civil war. It's civil war between the 12 tribes of Israel, which is astounding to me because if you remember what Israel was supposed to be, if you go back into the earliest days of Israel and their father Abraham, the first Jew, Abraham, what we're seeing in 2 Samuel 7 is that Israel is at war with each other. But this is what God said about Israel in their beginnings. Yahweh said to Abram, this is Abraham, He says, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. What do we call that land? The promised land, the land of Canaan. In 2 Samuel chapter 2, where is Israel? They're in the promised land, the land of Canaan that God promised to Abraham. They're home. But they're not doing what they're supposed to. The Lord continues with Abram. He says, I will make you a great nation. Not a nation at war amongst themselves, a great nation whom the other nations will look at. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you, Abraham, and your people will be a blessing to the rest of the world. When the world sees the relationship that you have through your covenant with me, when they see how loving and compassionate and faithful and patient and giving and gracious and merciful I am as your God, when they see our relationship, you, Israel, will draw the world to want to have a relationship with me. You will be a blessing to all the world. But what do we see in 2 Samuel 7 in the hearts of Israel? War. Brother killing brother. Are they being a blessing to the rest of the world? The rest of the world that's watching Egypt is watching, Assyria is watching, Damascus is watching, the Arameans, the Ammonites, everybody's watching what happens in Israel. Are they being a blessing to the world by killing each other off? No, they're doing the absolute opposite of that. That's the lengths of their depravity here. They're not being a blessing to the world. Instead, they're fighting each other and killing each other instead of going to Yahweh, who promised them that they would be a great nation and a blessing to all the world. Instead of going to this God and saying, God, you are our God, we are your people. Whom have you called to lead us? We will follow him as our king. Tell us who it is. But instead of seeking God, they seek blood. Interesting, isn't it? This is only the first battle. These 24 men having killed each other turn into this. In 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30, as the battle rages, as it gets bigger and bigger now, it says Yoav returned from following Avner. You can go back and read the story. I can't tell it again. So Yoav, David's man, stops chasing Avner, Saul's man. The battle is over for the day, and they count the lost. Who's winning? The house of Saul or the house of David? The first battle has taken place. It says 19 of David's servants besides Asahel were missing, but the servants of David had struck down many of Benjamin and Avner's men, so that 360 men died. David loses 19, Saul loses 360. The house of David is winning over the house of Saul by exponential numbers, 19 to 360. The men of Israel should have wondered and gone to Yahweh yet again. Lord, why is it that we're losing? Are we doing this wrong? Are we in sin against you? Or have we decided wrong to go to battle against our brother? Have you already chosen and anointed a king for Israel? Nobody asked any questions. They continued the fighting. The fighting went on for 7.5 years. Astounding. Just astounding. 7.5 years it would take for the 11 northern tribes to accept David as their king. What about these tribes? I just want to say a word or two about the tribes to make sure we all understand the 12 tribes of Israel. I turn you back to the first book in the Bible, the book of Genesis. Let me just say, I just read from Genesis chapter 12 where God calls Abraham, who was living in a city called Ur of the Chaldeans, up near modern-day Babylon, Iraq. Modern-day Iraq is where Abraham was living when God called him and said, go to a different land. Leave your father, leave your paganism, leave the idolatry. Nahor was an idolater. We know this from the Scripture. Abraham's father, grandfather, they were idolaters. They didn't know the living God. What else were they going to worship? The living God comes and introduces himself to Abraham, says, I'm calling you out for a special mission. I've given you a special place. I'm making special promises to you. The children that will come from you will bless the whole world, because one day one will come from you whose name is Emmanuel, the God with us. The Savior will come through you, Abraham. Abraham has a son. His name is Ishmael. Remember, God comes to Sarah, says, you will be pregnant this time next year. They laugh, it's not going to happen. That's the next part of the story. But God promises Abraham, I'm trying to keep this short. God promises Abraham, through your seed, all the world will be blessed. And so Abraham and his wife are in their 90s. They can't get pregnant. They are beyond the years of sexual ability to procreate. And so Sarah says, listen, Abe, this is never going to happen. Take my maid Hagar, younger, take my maid and go into my maid, raise up a son to the maid, and that son will be your heir. So Ishmael comes from the relationship between Abraham and Hagar, his Egyptian maid. God comes back to Abraham, says, Abraham, he gives him all the promises again. Abraham says, I have no son of my own flesh. Let Ishmael, I pray, Father, let Ishmael be the promised one. And God said, no, he's not the one. One that will come from your own seed, and Sarah's own seed will be the son. So they have the promised son, the miracle, named Isaac. They have the son Isaac. Sarah, a 90-year-old woman, gives birth to a son named Yitzhak, whose name means laughter, because when the angel told Sarah, you're going to have a son, what did she do? Yeah, right. She laughed. And so the reminder to the promise of God in Sarah and Abraham's life is that every time you look at that kid, you're going to call him laughter, and remember the day when you didn't believe my word. It'll make you dependent on me. It'll certainly keep you humble, won't it? Isaac has a son named Jacob. Has twin sons, Jacob and Esau. I can't tell the story, but Jacob is the son of promise, and it's Jacob that has 12 sons. Where do we get the 12 tribes of Israel? Because Jacob, not Abraham and not Isaac, but Jacob, the third patriarch, has 12 sons. He has 2 wives, their sisters. What are their names? Leah and Rachel. They each have been married to Jacob with 2 maids, Bilhah and Zilpah. And these 4 women have for Jacob, they birth for Jacob 12 sons. And those 12 sons make up the tribes of Israel. Each of those boys would have a family name and a tribal unit that would be attached to them for all eternity. When Jacob was dying, he gathers his 12 boys around his deathbed. And one by one, Jacob tells his sons a prophecy concerning their future. One by one, Jacob goes through all 12 of his sons. These are the sons Simeon, Reuben, Levi, Judah, all of these men. Asher, Dan, Naphtali, Zebulun, Issachar. These are the sons. These are their names. These are Jacob's boys. They're all around his deathbed listening, Father, what will you say about me? At the end of it, in Genesis chapter 49, verse 28, it's a fascinating chapter. Go read it. It says, after Jacob has talked to all the boys, and these 12 men are the 12 tribes of Israel. You want to know where the tribes come from? Genesis 49 is your book. And earlier, seeing them born. But Genesis 49 puts them all in one chapter, speaks to each one of them, gives a prophecy about these boys. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father, that's Jacob, said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them every one with the blessing appropriate to him. Now this is interesting. I want to show you what he said about Judah, David's family, and what he said about Benjamin, Saul's family. You ready? 12 sons all gathered. He gets to his 4th son, Judah. And this is what he says to Judah. His father Jacob, this is what God says through Jacob to Judah concerning his future and the future of his tribe, his tribal people, his family tree, his descendants. Jacob says to Judah, David's family, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Now I want you to imagine a king sitting on his throne with his golden ruler's staff in his hand. You've seen this in pictures. Kings always have. They have their robes, their regal, majestic uniforms on. They have a big poofy hat with the gold cross on it or something. And they always have that staff, that golden ruler's staff. And what Jacob tells Judah is it is for you, son, and your people, to be the kings of Israel forever. It's the house of Judah that will be the kings of Israel forever. It doesn't say here, no other tribe will ever be king. What it says is, once the house of Judah holds the scepter, it will never depart from Judah. And then he says, it will last so long, the kingship through the house of Judah will last until an event. Somebody is coming. Something's happening. And he prophesies this thousands of years before it happens. He says, Judah will be the kings of Israel until Shiloh comes. Shiloh for you Southerners. Shiloh for you Jews. Now you'll notice Shiloh is capitalized. Shiloh is a title for a person. Shiloh in Hebrew means, this is what the word means, to whom it belongs. Shiloh is the one person to whom it belongs. What's the it? Read the rest of the verse. And to him shall be the obedience of all the people. Who is it that's coming that the obedience of all the world belongs to him alone? That every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Judah's own ruler, the Lion from the tribe of Judah. It's Yeshua. It's Jesus. Shiloh, to whom it belongs. Here's a promise of the coming Messiah, the coming Savior, the coming King of Israel, the one we know as Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the Messiah. Here's a promise in Genesis 49:10 that Judah will be the kings until one day an eternal king will come. And to that king, to Shiloh, belongs the right to rule all humanity. Only to Jesus. That's what he says to Judah. That's what he says to the coming house of David. David is one of the house of, he's in the tribe of Judah. David, a great, however, you could count 14 generations from Judah all the way to King David. David, his bloodline is Judaic. He is of the house of Judah. Who has the right to rule in Israel? David does. What does it say about Benjamin? Again, Jacob has his 12 sons gathered. He has something to say to every one of the sons. And this is what he says to Benjamin. Genesis 49, verse 27. He says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. Positive or negative? Doesn't sound great, does it? I'll show you a couple examples of this ravenous wolf in just a second. This is what Jacob says. Imagine gathering around your father. It's your turn. He says, Benjamin, your ears perk up. Father, what are you going to say great about me and my descendants? You're a wolf, son. Your people will be just as bad. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the spoil. He's a warmonger, likes fighting. There's several things said about the house of Benjamin in the Scripture. Do a search for the house of Benjamin somewhere and go read all the passages in the Old Testament concerning Benjamin. You'll find things that show the ferocity and the violent spirit of the Benjamites on through time. They're a violent and ferocious people. Let me give you a couple of examples. Well, let me ask you first, from which tribe does Saul come? He's a Benjamite. These are Saul's people. Saul, Ishbosheth, these are Saul's people. The ravenous wolf. And on through history, we see Benjamin trip over themselves morally over and over and over and over. Judges chapter 20. The Levite, remember this story? So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered by the Benjamites, the Levite said, I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. Remember the story? The ravenous men, sexually depraved, the men of Gibeah have come to the house of this old man. And who do they want to sexually abuse all night? They don't want his female concubine. They want the Levite. They want the man. They want to engage in homosexual activity with this Levite man. These are the ravenous wolves, the Benjamites. But the men of Gibeah rose up against me. They surrounded the house at night because of me. They wanted me. They didn't want to kill me. They wanted to have sex with me. Depraved people. They intended to kill me only after they had used me. Instead, they ravished my concubine. They raped his concubine all night until she died. The ravenous wolf of Benjamin. This story ends with the tribe of Benjamin almost being wiped off the planet by the other 11 tribes of Israel, as the Levite takes an ox, remember, and he takes the body of the concubine as it is. He takes her body, cuts her up into 12 pieces, sends her out through the tribes of Israel. They gather as one man to Mitzpah. They fight against the ravenous wolf Benjamin until they almost annihilate their brother tribe. 600 men are left. The ravenous wolf Benjamin. These are Saul's people. In 1 Samuel chapter 9, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish. He had a son whose name was Saul. I show you this chapter or this verse only to show you that Saul is of the tribe of ravenous wolves. He was a choice and handsome man, this Shaul, Saul. There was not a more handsome person than he among the sons of Israel. From his shoulders and up, he was taller than any of the people. That's King Saul. He's a Benjamite. Now, what does the Scripture say about Saul and his ferociousness and his violent spirit? Anything coming to mind before I show you the verse about Saul and his violent spirit and his ferociousness, his ravenous appetite as a wolf for violence? Let me show you in 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 10. It says, Saul tried to pin David, his son-in-law. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with his spear. Who does that? This is the king trying to murder his son-in-law in his palace. That's a ravenous wolf. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but David slipped away out of Saul's presence so that he stuck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. I could have showed you another verse where it says Saul threw the spear at his own son Jonathan, because Jonathan, he thought, was siding with David. And he couldn't have that, so then Saul tries to kill his own son. He's a ravenous wolf. What else does the Scripture say? Who else does this ravenous wolf, this son of Benjamin, go after? This man Saul. The king, that Saul, said to the guards who were attending him, turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death. You see, ravenous wolf. That's who these people are. The tribe of Judah, the kingship belongs to you. The tribe of Benjamin, you're wolves, you're wild animals. Here we see it. Tries to kill his son-in-law, tries to kill his son, turns against God's own anointed priests and high priest, and has Doeg the Edomite kill all of the priests. That's a ravenous wolf. So the prophecy of Jacob to his 12 sons, we see, comes very, very true. Turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand was also with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and they did not reveal it to me. See, they're on David's side. They deserve to die. Insanity. David was already anointed the next king of Israel. But the servants of King Saul were not willing to put forth their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. So Saul turns to Doeg the Edomite, and Doeg puts the priest to death. But at whose command? At the command of the Benjamite, the ravenous wolf, the man named Shaul, the one we know as Saul. We move into 2 Samuel chapter 3. Turn the page with me. And we're going to see General Avner Saul's man, the house of Saul, the commander of Saul, dead Saul's army. We are going to see in this chapter King Avner switch allegiance from Saul's house to David's house. And you say, how in the world can a man who's been in battle for 7.5 years all of a sudden flip a switch? I don't want you anymore. I mean, it was this right here. I am all things for the house of Saul. You know what? You've gone too far. I am all things for the house of David. How do you do that? We're going to see God use the temper of Avner to change the world for Israel. God will use Avner, the commander of Saul's house, to put David in power in Israel. Only God can do these things. So General Avner will switch allegiance to King David, and Avner will then be killed by David's general Joab. The fighting continues. Verse 1 says, now there was a long war. How many years was the war? It was 7.5 years. That's how long David only had control over one house, the house of Judah. That's how long it took for David to take control of the entire nation of Israel. A long war, 7.5 years. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And David grew steadily stronger, but the house of Saul grew weaker continually. God is little by little showing His hand. It's the house of David and the tribe of Judah that will rule. So we see a couple of things here. David's house is getting stronger. Saul's house is getting weaker. It says that clearly. We see that Yahweh, or we remember that Yahweh had anointed David, anointed him with Samuel the priest's holy oil. Yahweh had anointed David some 18 years earlier, but Yahweh allowed the transfer of power to take 7.5 years. I would think because of the obstinance of the people of Israel. We'd rather fight than ask God who will lead us. We'd rather kill our brothers in war than ask God, who do you want to be our leader? It took Yahweh 7.5 years. He allowed 7.5 years for the transfer of power. It's clear that Yahweh is on David's side. He sent Samuel to David's house 18 years earlier and anointed David king. So Yahweh is on David's side and will crown him king one day soon. We're getting to the end of this 7.5 years with these events. In 2 Samuel chapter 3, Yahweh, here's the twist in the story that no one could ever see coming. Yahweh will use Avner, who is still committed to the house of Saul and Ishbosheth. Yahweh will use this commander, Avner, to crown David as king over all 12 tribes of Israel. You say, how in the world is God going to switch Avner's commitment from the house of Saul to the house of David with one comment out of the mouth of a man? One statement, and the man flips his switch. One statement. Yahweh's plan, what we can see from this, His use of Avner, is that Yahweh's plan, His plan for humanity, His plan for Abraham and Isaac and Jacob's son, for one day for Jesus, the Messiah, to come to earth, it's always moving forward, regardless of how Israel tries to mess it up. Regardless of the disobedience of any man, God's plan moves forward. It is like a steamroller. It cannot be stopped. You want to get in front of it, you'll get crushed. It's as simple as that. His plan always moves forward. It always fulfills His purposes and His desires. And in the plan here is this Avner who's against David for 7.5 years, and then one day, one statement, boom, it's over. I'm going to David's side. How does it happen? We keep reading. Sons were born to David. Now, I told you that there were 4 sections to 2 Samuel chapter 3. or 2 Samuel altogether. This is the end of the first section. I told you each section ends with 4 verses that name David's sons or a group of David's people. Here are those 4 verses. Who was David married to? Who are his early sons? David spent 7.5 years in Hebron, in the city of Hebron. And this is who he married, and these are the sons he had while he was there. Sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn, Amnon, by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. So it tells the son's name, it tells the mother of the son's name. So what's David's wife, number 1? What's her name listed in this? Ahinoam. He's got 1 wife. Keep reading. His second son was named Eliab, and his mother was Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Remember Abigail from 1 Samuel 25, the great Abigail. How many wives does David have now? That's number 2. How many is he supposed to have according to the law of Moses? Just 1. Just 1. It's the great King David, a man after God's own heart. Was he perfect? No. If you need any verse, just take any of a collection of verses. But here's one right here that shows he was in disobedience to the law of Moses. That's wife number 2. So he has a son Amnon, a son Eliab. The third son, Avshalom. Who was his mother? You would think it's one of those 2 women. Please, David, don't continue multiplying wives. No, it's a third wife, Maacah. So now we have listed 3 of David's wives. The daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. Now, Avshalom is an important name. Remember his name. He's an important son because he will try to usurp the kingship from David. When David becomes king in Jerusalem, Avshalom will rise up against his own father. He will steal the hearts of the people, and he will take the kingship from David for a short amount of time. David's own son does this. So David has 3 wives, 3 sons from 3 different wives. Verse 4 says, and the 4th son was Adinoiah, the son of Haggith. So now here's the 4th son with a 4th woman. 4 sons by 4 women now. Another son of note, this one, circle it, underline it. He's going to come back again. Because as David lays on his deathbed, this Adonijah will come along and say, I will be the next king of Israel. I will take the throne from my father. And he will announce himself as the next king of Israel while David is still alive in David's last days and his dying days. But David will give the throne to Solomon. Verse 4, the end, it says he had a 5th son. Shphatiah is the man's name, Shphatiah. He's the son of Abital. So now we have a 5th woman, a 5th wife, a 5th son by a 5th wife. And then we have yet another, all in Hebron. In 7.5 years, David was busy gathering wives to himself and having these children. The 6th was Ithream by David's wife Eglah. So here we have a 6th wife and a 6th son. These were born to David. All these sons were born to David by these 6 separate wives while David was at Hebron. Does David have any other wives? At this point, does David have any other wives? The answer is yes. Who is she? What's her name? Remember what one of David's rewards was for killing Goliath the giant? He was to marry a daughter of who? Of King Saul. And he was given a daughter named Michal, M-I-C-H-A-L, by King Saul. David has another wife who's not with him, who he will soon call to be with him, Michal, who's been given to another man. So he has 7 wives, but in Hebron he had gathered 6 wives, and he has 6 sons. You wonder why in the world this is happening. I want you to turn to a verse with me. Turn to the next chapter quickly. Turn to 1 Kings chapter 3. I just want to show you how this works. Why are these kings gathering so many wives? Is it just for pleasure? Is that what it is, pretty woman? I want to add her to the harem? Or is something else going on? And look at what King David's son Solomon, look what it says in 1 Kings chapter 3. Easier for me just to show it to you. This is what's happening. David is taking the rulership of Israel. He's meeting and making alliances with other kings around him. And this is how this is part of the contract in the ancient Near East. This was customary. In 1 Kings chapter 3, this is David's son Solomon. It says, "Then Solomon formed a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house." He makes a political alliance, a military agreement with the king of Egypt. And what's part of the covenant, the contract? Take my wife. Here's the idea behind that, in case you're wondering, why would you give your daughter? Because I would never put my wife in danger by attacking her father's people, Egypt. I would never put my own wife in danger. It's a protection. I'm going to protect my wife like I protect myself. If I take the king's daughter as my own wife, I'm guaranteeing that this contract will be upheld, that I will hold to my word, and I won't bomb or attack Egypt at the danger of my own wife. That's what's going on here. That's why in the early years of King David's life, he's collecting, it seems, wives. Most of this was military alliance. It was political alliance with other nations, and it was common. Should David have done it? Look what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, concerning a king. It says, "He shall not multiply wives for himself." Does David have to be worried about political and military alliances with other kings on planet Earth? Or does David have to know that the Lord fights my battles? What's most important? What should David's commitment be? That Yahweh is my king supreme, and that as his under king, I will rely on God. I will not multiply wives. I will not increase my silver and gold. I will not increase my horses. The king is told not to do any of these things because God fights the battles, but David disobeys this. Yahweh has forbidden multiple wives, but David adds wives because, hey, everybody else is doing it. Isn't that how we fall into sin sometimes? We might call it peer pressure. It's the way they do it. And who am I to tell the king of Egypt I won't accept his daughter? Who am I to tell the king of Geshur that I won't accept his daughter? Who am I? Everybody's doing it. It would cost him, David's eye for women would cost him. It would certainly cost his son Solomon. The greatness of David, though, let's not forget that God tells these people, and certainly the king in Deuteronomy 17:17, you cannot multiply wives for yourselves. And what's the reason? Because when you start multiplying these Gentile wives who have a worship system all their own, who worship their own national pagan idolatrous gods, satanic gods, they will introduce their gods to you and draw you away. And you will stop worshiping me alone and start worshiping all their gods also. And I forbid that. So do not multiply wives because they will turn your heart away. The greatness of David, though, the strength of David is that even though by the time you get through 1 Kings, by the time you get to the book of Chronicles and all the things it says about David and his wives, he has about 8 wives in total. He has 21 children in total, but he never turned to any of their foreign gods. David was a man after Yahweh's heart only. But how did that fare for his son Solomon? Turn back to it. I should have had you stay. Let's just look at it. We've got like 1 minute left. 1 Kings chapter 11. David multiplied 8 wives for himself in disobedience to the Mosaic law. You shall not multiply wives. 1 man, 1 woman, that's it. A man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his singular wife. But of the 8 wives, David never turned to their gods. He was strong in that regard. Not so with Solomon, his son. Every man is different, aren't we? We all have strengths and weaknesses. David had a weakness and a strength. Solomon had a strength and a weakness. Now King Solomon, I'm in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. Just read what it says. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh. Remember, we just read he made a military political alliance with Pharaoh. Pharaoh gave him his daughter as a wife. So he's got that wife, but he loved other foreign women also. And it gives lists of Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittite women. These are pagan, these are Gentile women, not Jews. From the nations concerning which he was gathering wives from all these nations, which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate for you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Marry a Jewish woman who worships the Jewish God. Do not marry a Gentile woman who worships Chemosh or Baal or Dagon or any of these, because you will fall to their false gods. David didn't fall. 8 wives. Let's see of Solomon, how he did. Solomon held fast to these in love. Verse 3, how many wives did David have? 8. Stupid. Solomon, ridiculously stupid. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And what are you going to get from that? The promise of God will be fulfilled. The words of God always come true. God said, they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. And it says, and his wives turned his heart away. Away from who? Away from the worship of Yahweh alone. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God. Listen to what it says, as the heart of David his father had been. David did it wrong by gathering 8 wives, but he had the strength to handle the idolatry. Saul did it wrong by gathering 700 wives, but he did not have the strength to handle the idolatry, and it destroyed him. And it destroyed the kingdom of Israel. And because of Solomon's idolatry, God would promise him, I'm going to rip the kingdom that had been united. David, it takes 7.5 years for Solomon's dad to get the kingdom together, all 12 tribes under one man. 1 generation later, Solomon comes along, walks so far away from God that God says, you know what? I'm going to split the kingdom again. The northern tribes that were of the house of Saul will go back to be of the northern tribe. They will have their own people, their own kings, and I will only leave you with Judah like you started, and I'll give you Benjamin also. But 10 tribes will leave. You, Solomon, have destroyed the united kingdom of Israel because of your idolatry. 1 generation goes by. How long does it take to destroy a nation? How many generations have to go by of people that turn away from God before God says, I've had it? 1 generation. Let's not forget that, Americans. 1 generation to walk away from God. I don't know in His patience how many generations God has allowed in America to walk away from Him, but it's more than 1 now. 3, 4, 5. I don't know, it depends on how you count generations, but there aren't this Generation X and Generation and whatever they call the Y and the Z and all these people. These are not people that are going to their colleges in droves trying to turn people into Christians. Our hearts have been turned away from our God. He destroyed Israel for it. We thank God for His grace and His mercy in at least letting the United States of America continue with the freedom to do this today. He's a merciful God, isn't He? How long can we rely on His patience? Only He knows. But as those who have the words of life, all I can say to you, friends, is go out and give the gospel of Jesus Christ to this unsaved world. Let's close in prayer this morning. Heavenly